6:30 p.m. And our first matter of business is I will move that we enter into executive session pursuant to GLC 30A, Section 21A3, to discuss strategy with respect to collective bargaining or litigation. If an open meeting may have a detrimental to the effect of the bargaining or litigation position of the public body, and the chair so declares, with the intention of returning to open session. Seconded by Jennifer? Yep. Gabriella?
I think Gabriella.
Gabriella. We'll go with Gabriella. And then for executive session, we will go by roll call vote. Roger?
Aye.
Katie? Tillman?
Aye.
Jennifer?
Aye.
Anna?
Aye.
William?
Aye.
Gabriella?
Aye.
Irv?
Aye.
And Sarah Vest, aye. All right, we are in executive session, and we will return.
No, it's going to be here.
a classroom down the
Usual space.
Margaret, you're not going to, you're going to be moving with
open session at 7:26. And
All right, we'll call Union 26 to order.
Second?
So when I call your name, just identify yourself. So,
Oh,
Margaret,
here.
Sarah Bess,
present.
William,
Present.
Katie,
Present.
Jennifer,
Present.
Irv, present. We're now in session,
Do you want to do this part?
yes.
Okay.
What would you like me to open first?
The memo, please, thank you. Shall I just jump in? Does that sound good, Irv?
Yes, we're doing a superintendent search, and of course, Jennifer is the lead on it.
Well, it's a committee effort. So, the superintendent search subcommittee met last week, and we've had a busy couple of weeks. So we prepared this memo that summarizes where we are right now. So, as you all recall, at our last joint meeting of these bodies voted to task the SSS with 4 things: a revised timeline, a draft job description, propose a search firm, and a process to solicit volunteers. So, I'm gonna start with the search firm, of the 4 items. So, the superintendent search subcommittee met via Zoom with 3 search firms: McPherson and Jacobson, HYA, and NESDEC. We also contacted several other firms. One declined to meet with us, stating that they were already full up with work. And then 2 others said they would be willing to work with us, but they don't really specialize in superintendent public K-12 searches, and so we declined to meet with them. The 3 that we spoke to do have a specialty in superintendent searches. We met with representatives. We met by Zoom with representatives from each of those firms, and we decided that 2 of them were better than the third. So we preferred McPherson and Jacobson or NESDEC. And we listed some of the things that we liked about each of those firms. If you could items, but they all had some, positive qualities to them, both McPherson and Jacobson and NESDEC. We then spoke to references for both firms. Anna spoke to one, and I spoke to one for NESDEC, and I spoke with one from Burlington. Someone from Burlington about McPherson and Jacobson. Also, William spoke to a NESDEC reference today. Didn't make it into the excuse me, into the memo. So I think what I'd like to see these 2 bodies do tonight is to discuss and then decide on which search firm to use, and then empower the SSS to go talk to that one search firm, request a formal proposal that the chairs can then sign. So that's what I think we should do. Do any of my fellow subcommittee members like to say anything?
All right,
Yeah, I didn't put my findings in, so I'll just read it real quick. I had a conversation with, I believe her name was Mikkel Bordeaux, who serves as the chair for the school committee at the Hampton-Wilbraham Regional School District in Wilbraham, Mass.
William, I think they want you to talk into the microphone.
Oh, okay. Sorry.
A little close.
Hold on. I think it's on.
It should be on.
Okay. I had a conversation with Mikkel Bordeaux, who serves as the chair for the school committee at the Hampton-Wilbraham Regional School District in Wilbraham, Mass. She spoke very positively about NASDEC's recent superintendent search. Despite a tight timeline that began in April, they successfully had a new superintendent in place before July 1st. So that was quite impressive that they were able to work in such a tight timeline. She praised them, how they guided them through the process, providing support tailored to the search committee's preferences instead of imposing specific approaches. Out of the 29 applicants, only 3 were from outside the local area, which I thought was impressive. They had 29 applicants, but they only had 3 that were not from a larger out-of-state audience, which I think we maybe talked about wanting to have a larger out-of-state audience. She expressed a strong willingness to use them again in the future. So it
Great.
was very positive.
Oh.
Thank you.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
Which one was that?
NASDAQ.
NESDEC?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
NESDEC.
Yep.
Yes.
I-
Yeah,
Ed?
yes.
I just wanted to say that we had two more references for McPherson and Jacobson, and I have not yet gotten calls back from those two people.
All right, so, I have two questions. Did the committee consider MASC at all?
We did not.
I think we discussed it
We did.
and we talked about it. So I
So-
would say that we did consider them.
So what was the reason not to pursue?
I think that, and even, I didn't comment on it because I didn't know if it was pertinent. I feel like some of the feelings we had is we didn't know if MASC would come without prejudices towards our committee, I guess I could say. And I feel that it was a similar, the person I spoke to from Wilbraham said that was another reason why they didn't go with MASC too, is they felt like that they were a little too opinionated for what their district wanted.
Interesting.
Which was interesting in that I myself felt a little bit of that, and then we kind of discussed that as a group, and we decided not to move forward looking heavily at them, but to look at the other choices first.
One more question for you. In terms of the firms, the two that you showed, I didn't see any figure down there in terms of money, in terms of the
It was
difference between the
a
two.
lot less than we had originally
So,
thought it would be.
sorry.
No, I mean the differences between the two firms.
So all three firms that we spoke to gave us ballparks around 15 to 20,000. They were all approximately the same, which was pleasantly surprising. And I don't know, less than I thought it would be, but they were all within the 15 to 20,000 range.
Well, will cost be one of your factors in terms of
It-
making a determination as to?
I mean, for me personally, no, because they're also similar.
I was gonna say, I think that a lot of them had clauses that they would match each other's prices too, didn't they?
One of them did, yes. I don't know if
We'd
they
have
all
to,
did.
they had, a lot of them had that, which we'd have to go back and check, sorry.
Yeah, go ahead, Sarah. That's
It's
great.
also a decision this whole group makes
Yes.
together, not just the subcommittee, right?
I just add
I'm
one
super appreciative of all of their research and all of their reaching out and the work that they're doing. Just those things are decisions that the whole group makes.
Right, and I'm assuming that when we get to making that decision, we'll have costs.
Yeah.
So, and I did one small thing I want to add to the conversation, just talking about sort of selection process. So, and I wrote a note to myself, you know, that given the price range, which is over $10,000, I want to check on the procurement rules that are involved. So you can have a request for a proposal and solicit proposals with votes and use criteria other than just price as a factor, but you have to sort of articulate what those are, and so there's some I's dotted and T's to cross process-wise. I'll do a little research on that and get that to you guys, so that we make sure to sort of fill out that paperwork. I mean, I think you get, the kinds of things you've done to date are all within the parameters of what the state expects you to do in that regard. It may be just more about documentation of that. And because you know, in some ways it was slightly informal in the process to date, it wasn't as explicitly formal, then, you know, but I'll tidy up the loose ends on that and get back to you on that, so.
Great,
I just
thank
want
you,
to make
Doug.
you aware that we might need to do a little, particular paperwork and process around procurement.
Great, awesome.
So, yeah, so that's interesting. I didn't think we'd have to go out with an RFP. But you're saying if it's over $10,000.
Yeah, I mean, that's the general rule of thumb. There's a lot
Right.
of different, you know, there's exemptions to the law. So for example, special education doesn't have that limitation. And if you're doing curriculum materials, you know, you can get from a sole source and up to, I think it's $70,000 if you're buying like textbooks, because they recognize that you've done the investigation on the process of determining a curriculum, then you have some latitude. So the law has some exceptions. This may be a category that does allow for exemption, you know, or exception to that, so I'm gonna double check. If not, it's not impossible. It's just a matter of, you know, sort of doing the appropriate sort of documentation process in and around the work. So just mentioning now before you actually make a hard choice.
So, see, all right, so that would mean that if we were gonna do have to do an RFP, if that comes down to it, then RFP goes out to everyone that, who wants to at least make a bid. All right,
Katie?
Katie,
I have two questions. First of all, thank you for doing this work, taking this upon yourselves. In terms of your placement you have this statistic, 85% placement of 5 years or more for McPherson and Jacobson. No equivalent or no similar statistic was offered, or could you find that out? Because that's a very
Yeah,
strong argument, in
Yeah.
my opinion. And then I guess my other question is, I'll just finish. In terms of how I guess my question would be, why just 3? Is that really all there is in terms of people doing this type of work?
so, for your first question, we didn't get that data point for the other search firm. We just, one of them, McPherson and Jacobson just volunteered it, and we didn't think to ask the other firm. So for me, I wanted to talk with at least 3. I figured I wanted to talk to at least 3 because I didn't think fewer than 3 would be warranted. And as I said, I did contact other search firms, and for various reasons, we just made the decision not to meet with them because they didn't have specialty in this area. So I felt that 3 at a minimum was sufficient.
And can I just ask, how did you start your search for these search?
I believe these 3 came to us from Kathy Mazer, who has heard of them or worked with them before. I believe in all 3 cases, or for McPherson and Jacobson and Nasdaq, I believe Kathy reached out to them prior to even our meeting to talk about it and had received initial documentation from them. And then I took it over from there and contacted them directly. HYA, she mentioned the name of the firm to me, said she had contacted them but hadn't heard back. And then I contacted them and they did respond. So that's how we found them. Sorry, and one last thing. The other 3 were, the one that declined was referred to me by a search firm that UMass is currently using. That search firm doesn't do public K-12 searches, but I asked them to recommend another firm. They did, and then that second firm declined to meet with us because they're full up. The other 2, I believe Gabriella got the names of those 2 also from Higher Ed, and they both said, we can work with you, but we don't specialize in this. They also mentioned that they typically charge around $60,000. One of them mentioned that, and that's usually a barrier for public school districts.
And I was gonna say, I reached out to several of my contacts, and Jacobson was one of the ones that was referred to me. And then when I referred it to her, then we had already gotten it, so we had gotten like referrals from them for two separate places. And mine was from a national gay and lesbian nonprofit that deals with Title IX and different things.
so, she'll be interesting if we do an RFP, because then these firms will come in and the others, which begs the question, and not a question, but something that we would, at least I think, I would be looking for from this committee, are the kinds of criteria by which we would be judging these firms in terms of making a decision. Jennifer?
I have an answer to that, and this is something that I've
I
wanted.
wasn't expecting it tonight, by the way.
Well, I mean, I guess I had hoped, so I understand that there may have to be an RFP process where we may have to post an RFP and allow firms time to respond, and we can follow up with Doug after this meeting. But I had hoped to leave this meeting with a decision from these 2 bodies about which search firm to pursue. Not signing a contract, because the chairs would need to do that, but like empowering the subcommittee to go talk with our one finalist preferred firm, get a formal proposal contract for the chairs to then sign, if that's the appropriate process. But if there needs to be other processes, that is what it is.
Before I go to you, William, Tillman, Doug, how would we be able to make any kind of decision based upon, we don't know what the cost is going to be? And the cost is a trigger point.
We have a
right?
cost.
You have a cost for them? They've given you a
Yes.
cost?
Yep.
Is it over 10,000?
Yes.
Yes.
Well, we got to go out to bid. unless you come up with something else.
Right, right. So I think that's the thing. And oftentimes you're, whenever you're dealing with these kind of things and you're not sure of what you think the price is gonna be, you try to get some sense of whether it would be more or less than 10,000 or whatever threshold. Different kinds of things have different thresholds, but 10,000 is generally sort of the most common one that we run up against. But there are, there's a few different rules around how you do a request for proposal. So you can, when you do that, you can preferentially make sure that certain people get the proposal so that they can do it. You do have to articulate, generally, if you're using a criteria other than price, which would be an RFQ, request for quote, or request for bid, RFB. But when you do a proposal, then you can have other criteria. As long as you articulate what those criteria are, and how your process is going to work as far as evaluating the different respondents, then you're fine. And so, I don't want us to get ahead of the curve. And again, it may be a circumstance where you can skip all of this, but I don't want to presume that we can just yet. So I think we may have to pause just a touch until we get to that point. But I do know that even with the request for proposal process, so like, for example, we did one recently with a roof, which I'll talk about in just a couple minutes. You can actively send that proposal to sort of qualified, vendors that would be a reasonable candidate for putting in a proposal or quote. So you can do that. You can kind of, it seems counterintuitive that, the whole process of procurement is to try to get and solicit the best and broadest range of things, and yet you can still be preferential in some of your treatment in that you can actively sort of notify people about it and request a bid specifically from them. There are times, and this may be one of those, where it's, there are sometimes state contracts, so there may be a state contract, procurement contract that includes companies that provide this kind of service. Often within those state contracts, it eliminates the need to do some of this. We can just, get quotes. So there's a few different wrinkles here. So there's a little, like I said, a little procurement research I'd like to do to make sure that we don't run into a situation where we're in, a problem with Chapter 30B, which is the procurement law for the state. So I don't think that it's going to be too hard, but at the same time, I don't want to do that before we get too far ahead of ourselves.
Sarah Bess.
So, can we listen to all of the information our SSS has procured and provided for us?
Absolutely.
And then have a preference at the end of our meeting? Or not a preference?
That might get a little shaky.
Not a preference,
Right.
okay. So maybe Jennifer and her crew, the subcommittee, can present their information so we can move forward.
Here's, all right, so I agree with everything people are saying, but I want to just throw some information out there. For years, minority firms were outside of the preferential bidding process and RFP process because they weren't they didn't know about it. So when I hear that, hey, well, we got these people that we know, then it's the old boy network. And so I automatically resonate with that. I would like for it to be as a fair and open process as possible, and that we, if we do not have to put out an RFP, fine. But if we have to put out an RFP, then I want it to be going out as broadly as possible so that all firms, I don't want preferential treatment for those firms we know. Am I clear? Or? William, you,
No.
or Tillman?
Yeah, so when we do the RFP, if you have to, I think the question of how these firms interact with the search committee, I think is an important consideration. And in what you've presented, there's distinctions in how they do it. I think we have a very clear vision of how much engagement we want in the selection process even early on. And so maybe we can articulate that in the procurement process so that we get a firm that is engaged with the search committee early on.
William, you want to go?
Yeah, I was just gonna say that I felt like after talking to all the firms, the other committee members can speak to this, but that they would come to all of us and talk to all of us in the beginning, and talk to us about the process and everything too. So I feel like that if we could focus on one tonight, that we can move forward, then it's gonna give us the ability to like, I don't think we would sign a dotted line contract until we all spoke with them. I don't know though, I could be wrong.
Sure.
And I do want to speak to your concern. I spoke to many organizations that represent historically marginalized people, and Jacobson was referred to me through those organizations. So I do think that it's not, I was pleasantly surprised to see that it also, the same name came from within our district, but I was surprised and glad that it also came from someone from the outside. That I feel like that I would respect, and the organization I respect.
I'm just want to get some clarity here. Are you asking, are you thinking that we should act tonight?
I think for the timely, I mean, if you're asking me directly, I would say that the time frame is like, it has to move, and the slower we stall it, the less quality applicants I feel like we're gonna get. And it's been very clear that it seems like the faster this process goes, not the faster, but the sooner we get started, it just gives us the time to dive in as deep as we want to, and dive in as deep as we feel that our community wants us to dive into. And if we stagnate the starting of it, it's going to delay the process, and the timeline's gonna become tighter, and it's gonna be harder for us to really dive in as deep.
I understand that, but and I'll get to all, my only concern is that we do not know if we have to go out for an RFP. If we make a decision that we're gonna, tonight, this group, this committee makes this decision that we're gonna choose a firm, then we're out of order,
That's what Doug said.
all right? So I think that any possibility of making a decision tonight is not possible. Katie?
Can I ask a clarifying question? Because I remember last meeting, we had a lot of discussion around the process, and I think the idea was next meeting, here we are, we would look at search firms that you all brought to the table, which we're doing now, and then we would also look at the revised timeline. So I guess my question is, between then, 2 weeks ago or whenever, and now, where is the communication where we could have figured out we needed an RFP?
I'm not on that committee. I really didn't know that we were gonna be coming back and that we were gonna be asked to make the decision tonight.
And that's a question for anybody,
Yeah,
maybe.
I didn't know that. That's A. And B, I think that, we could say that, well, the school committee as well as Doug, we didn't really look down the road and say, hey, look, we might possibly have to go out for an RFP. That was not put out on the table. Tillman.
To me, the subcommittee has demonstrated that they're very thorough in their evaluation of search firms, and that they have at least initially come up with a list of, reasonable firms. So I would be comfortable with authorizing the subcommittee with, that they can find out what the procurement rules are, and that they can proceed with whatever the rules are, if it's an RFP or direct proposal, whatever it is, and give the subcommittee the authority to sign a contract up to a certain amount. We can discuss what that is. It sounds like, if we authorized $25,000 or $30,000, we would be well within the range of what most firms charge, so that they could move ahead speedily.
Jennifer, I'll come back to Tillman.
Okay, so the NESDEC quote came in at $13,760. The McPherson and Jacobson quote came in at $19,850. NESDEC, however, did say that they would match any competitive quote. So, and even though those are, depending on how you look at it, very different, but they're also sort of in the same ballpark. So anyway, 13,000 and 19,000. Okay, I'm going to share my perception of these two firms, which is something I didn't put in the memo because this is just me personally speaking. I went into this thinking that I assumed probably any search firm can do a search, can post the search, run the focus groups, can work with us, can take in candidates, can set that whole structure up. What I was really looking for was to hear from a search firm that has the experience of proactively identifying and recruiting qualified candidates. I didn't want a search firm that was just going to post and then receive applications. I want someone that's going to go out and find us qualified people to apply. McPherson and Jacobson does that. They have a lot of experience doing that, and they even spelled it out in their proposal. If I can find that one line that impressed me, I'll read it to you. But the person we spoke to also said that they do have experience doing this. So that was a major plus for me for McPherson and Jacobson. That being said, when we asked them about working with a search committee, they kind of like said they said they would work with whatever we have, but their process seemed to be that they deliver 5 or 6 candidates to the school committee. And then I said, well, actually, what I think we want to do is we want our search committee, which may be large, to review all applicants. And they said they could work with us on that, but it's not part of their regular practice. So there's a pro and a con for McPherson and Jacobson. NESDEC, when we talked to them, when I asked them, do you proactively seek out candidates to apply, they kind of said no. They said we don't really do that. They said we receive applicants, but they didn't do proactive identifying of applicants. So a con for NESDEC in my mind. A pro for NESDEC was that they regularly work with search committees. In fact, that's part of their practice, as they want the search committee to see all applicants. So that was a positive on that end for NESDEC. But for me, the kicker, or the thing that pushes McPherson and Jacobson to the top of my list, is their proactive seeking out of applicants. I actually, for me personally, the fact that NESDEC didn't do that pushed them off my list. But obviously, we're a committee and we all work together. So my fellow committee members, and there were reasons to like NESDEC. But for me, that made them not my top choice. Not even a choice I would make. But that's me sharing my perceptions.
Gabrielle?
It seems to me that that is one of those criteria that should be strongly stated in an RFP, because it's an important part of getting a wide and diverse pool for the committee to look at, the search committee to look at. And we know that it's a challenging district, and we want to make sure that we get, as many qualified candidates as possible. So I think that that's definitely one of those criteria that should be spelled out in an RFP. And in looking at firms that apply to that RFP, that one would probably be weighted a little bit higher than some of the other things. It seems that, given that we don't know if we have to go out for an RFP process or not, it's challenging to continue talking about these here. So I'd like to make a motion, which I think is in line with what Tillman was saying, and that is, I move to empower the SSS to move forward either on writing an RFP if it's deemed that it's necessary, and then getting that RFP distributed, or if it's not necessary to write an RFP, to choose one of the firms, based on their discussions and their research, that they think would be good for us to work with.
All right. There's the motion. It's before we have it read back over, I can take a second, and then we can come back and read it again before we have discussion of it.
Second.
May I ask a question for the minutes? I'm
Right.
so sorry. Ms. Stacer, did you say that they can contract with one of the firms, or contract the firm to come and meet the full committee?
It was Gabriella.
That wasn't
Oh.
me. I'm so sorry.
Ms. Gabriella?
I'm sorry, Ms. Weaver. Could you
was in the
confirm
way.
which you said at the end?
I said to contract with.
To
one of the
contract,
firms.
okay, thank you so much.
Could be amended.
So Debbie, do you have all of that?
I think so. I'm happy to read it back. Ms. Wilson made a motion to empower the SSS. Weaver, oh my gosh. It's been a long day, I apologize. Ms. Weaver made a motion to empower the SSS to move forward with writing an RFP if that is necessary, or if it is not required, to contract with one of the firms identified tonight.
It's been moved in second, so discussion, Margaret,
I just wanted to say a couple of things about McPherson and Jacobson that impressed me. One was the 85% of the people placed for 5 years or more. That today I think speaks a lot about the firm. The other thing is that they are familiar with regional school districts. And for me, that's another important thing. One of the firms that we did talk to had no experience with regional school districts. And we are a complicated regional district, so I think that's important. And, there was one. Oh, I just wanted to mention, if you don't already know, that there are 3 superintendent searches in the valley going on right now. So we have East Hampton, Amherst, and Union 28. So I think that if we can move forward somewhat expeditiously, it would be to our benefit.
Jennifer?
I want to talk about a friendly amendment without making suggesting a friendly amendment yet, which is that I think these 2 joint committees need to decide on a search firm, not the subcommittee. The subcommittee actually, I don't think, is or should be empowered to choose a firm. We're bringing you the information. So at some point, I might suggest amending the amendment to name a firm, amending the motion to name a firm.
Can we name the firm?
Oh, but maybe we, well, but so amend it to, because I don't think this, okay, fine, that's fine, we don't have to name a firm, but I don't think
I have
that,
an
anyway,
I
sorry.
think I can amend it.
Okay.
So I'd like to suggest an amendment to my motion, which is that, so the part about they can write an RFP if an RFP is required, and then I said if an RFP is not required. So the amendment would be if the RFP is not required, that they can return to the committee with a specific name for us to vote on.
Wait a minute, that's an amendment, or are you just amending, or
Just amend me the motion.
just amending the motion?
I think the person who seconded needs to agree with the amendment. I don't remember who seconded.
I think it was you.
Okay.
That's okay, Joe. No,
Wait,
that's
wait,
good word.
let
I
me-
think it was you who actually
yeah.
seconded it the first time.
It's got,
Yeah.
Oh,
the amendment,
then I agree to the amendment.
right, I was, so, we're actually amending the first motion,
Yes.
and this amendment has been properly seconded, all right? So is there any further discussion of that,
The amendment?
of the amendment?
Tillman.
Tillman,
So I understood that the original motion intended to give authority to the subcommittee to execute on a contract. The amendment seems to require now that at least under one circumstance, they have to come back to the full committee, which defeats the, speediness argument. So I would have preferred that we give authority to the subcommittee. I understand that Jennifer had said that that's not what she thinks we should do. But in the interest of, moving forward, I think we've seen some search firms here. We need to learn about procurement rules, but we're also under time pressure, so I would have preferred a motion where we just hand off that authority. Maybe can include the chairs if we need to. And not require a 2-week delay.
Katie?
Go ahead.
I have a question about the need for speed. to my knowledge, an applicant could apply to multiple school districts.
Yes.
And in the end, it's not who gets it out. I mean, offers, yeah, that we wanna be in that timeline of similar offers, but in the end, the decision will be made in terms of what that candidate feels is the best fit for that person in terms of what kind of school district. We are a very complicated school district at the moment, not to mention there's multiple districts within that role, so, I'm not sure. Yeah, I think we wanna keep within a time frame, which is probably your next discussion, but I'm not so sure a delay of 2 weeks or whatnot is really gonna make or break. And I guess I also want similar comparisons, like, yeah, that 85% looks really good to me too, but I also wanna know what is what's the number for the other search firm?
So speaking to the amendment, anyone, and for any further discussion?
Point of order.
Yes?
Since the person who made the motion made the amendment and the seconder agreed, I don't think we need to vote on the amendment.
We did vote on the amendment.
Haven't voted.
No, we haven't voted on the amendment, but it's been, the amendment was second, if I'm not mistaken. Did I miss that? I thought there was,
I'm sorry, you asked for comments on the amendment. I thought you wanted us to vote on the amendment. I don't think we need to.
you don't think we need to, even though the amendment was put on the floor and
Because the-
properly second?
Because the amendment was made by the original motion maker and approved by the
Then-
original motion seconder.
Right, it shouldn't have been an amendment then. It should have just been an addition.
That's what an amendment is.
That's right. Yeah, but amendment properly, when an amendment is made, an amendment is something that amends the original motion.
Yes, and when the original motion maker makes the amendment and the seconder agrees with it, it doesn't need to be
I'm not
voted
gonna
on.
argue rules with you, but I don't think it's correct. But anyway, let's move on, and we'll just vote on this, on the original motion.
The amended motion.
Can,
All right, go ahead.
can we have what the current motion says?
Yes, the amended
Yes.
motion, okay.
Could Debbie please have a microphone?
Yeah, you got that.
Okay, bear with me because I have to find it. The motion would now read, Ms. Weaver made a motion to empower the SSS to move forward with writing an RFP if it is necessary, or if it is not required, they can return to the committees with a specific firm to vote on. Here you go.
All right, I just want to make sure know where I am. So we're going to get ready to vote on this motion that's just been read. That's what I'm hearing. Now, before we come to a vote on the motion, is there any further discussion on the motion? Let me see, I got your hand first, Anna.
Okay, so I just wanted to say one word about NASDAQ before, I spoke to a reference, and, I mean, all our references have many positive things to say about whoever we call about. I'm sure that's why they include them on their list of people.
Yes.
This particular reference has used NASDAQ twice. The first time, the superintendent stayed 6 years, and then the last search they did was 5 years ago, and the superintendent is still there. Obviously, they would choose to use NASDAQ again if they needed to. They also said that they did not choose MASC because they didn't like their terms of reference. Basically, they felt like their contract was too a la carte, and like it was like this fee for this, and this fee for that, and this fee for this, and this fee for that. Whereas NASDAQ was like, this is what we give you, and this is how much it costs, and we do all of this. So they liked that style of contract a little bit better. And then the one thing that I would say is, I think that the McPherson-Jacobson firm definitely is stronger on the idea of going out and finding candidates. NASDAQ definitely is a little bit more passive. They reach out to their contacts, they see if their contacts know of anybody who's looking, but they don't cold call candidates up and say, hey, I know you're not looking, but I have this job and I want you to apply. They don't do that. Or I'm sure that if you push them to do it, they would probably say, okay, fine, but that's not what they usually do. However, the one place, I think Jennifer mentioned a little bit, where they sort of like push a little bit over McPherson, Jacobson, and like, this is about what you think is most important, right? If you think that reaching out is most important, then that's the win, but their system to show all of the candidates to the whole search committee, to work very directly with the search committee, is a system that is designed to work with a group like ours from the start, and they don't have to like modify their standard approach to work with a group like ours. So that's their only, and they see, of the firms, I think they have more experience in the New England area than McPherson, but McPherson definitely has done searches in our area, and they have done very well. So I just wanted to make sure that everybody had the full information, and I mean, we've talked about this a little bit before. We wanted to bring the decision back to the committee and not necessarily say, here's what we recommend, you should vote for this person or this firm. So if we're gonna come back, I think we can come back with maybe just a little bit more information. And I'll just, okay.
Just remember, we're discussing a motion that's already on the floor. All right? Go ahead, Sarah Bess.
So what if we empower the SSS to create the RFP if it is necessary, and if it's not necessary, to come back with quotes from 2 firms for us to vote on?
Wait a minute. Is that a motion you're putting up that we're going to vote on?
Well, we're discussing the motion, right? Like, that's
Right.
part of what's being,
Wait a minute. We have a motion on the floor. What I heard you just say was something that was what I consider to be beyond the motion. But so I guess I want to keep us on track. I want to get rid of this motion after we discussed it fully. If there isn't any other thing that other person who wants to speak to the motion, then we move on. But if you're going to speak to the motion, then I'll recognize you. Jennifer.
So I plan to vote in favor of the motion, and I do think we need to dispose of this motion. And I think it's worded as best as it can be, given our situation where we don't know if an RFP is needed, and we've been advised not to pick a firm tonight. So I think it's worded as well as it can be, and I plan on voting in favor of it. That said, the motion says for this SSS to come back with 1 search firm, and I'm still maintaining that I don't think the subcommittee should choose 1 firm. So my suggestion is that we discuss and vote on the motion, and then I think that these 2 bodies need to pick a preferred firm. Maybe that doesn't need to be voted on. Maybe we can just do it by consensus. Maybe we can each say what our preferred firm is and not have a vote on it, so that I hear you, so that we can, I hear everything that's being said, but the subcommittee should not be the ones making the decision. We need guidance from this group. So maybe after we dispose of the motion, this group could then talk about what's important to us, what's important to you in a search firm, and give that guidance to the subcommittees, so that we don't feel like we're making the decision, because I don't think that's appropriate.
All right. So, Debbie, could you read that motion so that we know where we are? Because
I'm sorry, I've got to,
The motion reads, I move to empower the SSS to move forward with writing an RFP if it is necessary, or if it is not required, they can return to the committees with a specific firm to vote on.
Now, Jennifer, hearing that, you're coming back to the committee with a specific firm. That's what this motion is. That's what it's saying.
Can we amend it?
Now, and Jennifer, are you saying that you want your committee to come back with more than one firm for us to consider?
So, yes, I think that that might be a good idea, to further amend the motion to say one or more firms for the committees to vote on.
All right, so the first motion is up there, and now we're going to amend, a true amendment to the motion. And Jennifer is making that, so would you just state it again?
Sure. The SSS would come back to the committees with two specific firms for the committees to vote on.
Well, one or more.
One or more. One or more.
One or more specific firms for the committees to vote on.
Second.
Any discussion?
I just have a question for Doug. How long, if you put out a request for proposal, how long do you have to wait before you can say the process for request is closed?
I don't know of any specific requirement. I mean, generally, there's, some time that you want to give people to respond. But at the same time, because you can, forward it to folks, you can use a little shorter time frame. So it's not a requirement to, oftentimes on like construction projects, you might put a 2 or 3 week time frame for them to respond to that, but it's not required. I'm not aware of any formal minimum requirement of
Okay.
time.
All right, thank you.
All right, so it's been properly second.
I have one more question.
And your question, yes?
How long will it take you to figure out if we need an RFP?
Let's go into my schedule. Because I occasionally have other things I have to do. I can get I actually have some time tomorrow afternoon, so I can spend, I can get a clarity on what it needs to look like by tomorrow afternoon. Kind of end of the day would be what I'd say is the best bet. So, the turnaround's quick. To provide clarity around that question, and then I think that, putting an actual RP together would be very quick as well, because we can be very narrowly focused in our scope. I think the hardest question will be, if we're gonna use criteria, can we articulate those in a sensible way quickly? But that's, other people have done these searches. Matter of fact, somebody sent me Boston's, but that's a little bit of overkill, I'm sure. There's this 23 pages long, which we don't need because we're not that large a city, and it has a whole bunch of other stuff in it. But there are other examples I'm sure we can find quickly to
All right.
leverage.
That's
So-
the RFP that they sent you?
That was,
Yeah, somebody sent me, people
Yes.
are watching me, sent me a link to the Boston search firm RFP for Boston schools.
all right, so are we ready to come to a vote on the amendment?
Yes.
All right, that's a good thing. So, starting from,
Wait, point of order.
yes.
I think we're not amending, we're just voting. No,
We're
all
amending.
this amendment,
We have
okay.
This was
Yeah,
a
this is
true
Sorry.
amendment.
Apologies.
Sarah Bess,
Point-
how do you vote?
Excuse me, I'm sorry, Irv, point of order. I just wanted to suggest two things. One, we want to make sure we know which committee's voting first, which would probably, sorry, because Gabriella made the original motion and you're doing, it would be a regional vote first. But second, I don't think we need to do a roll call vote if we're in person. We do, we don't?
We do not.
Okay.
All right, so anyway,
So the motion was
Gabrielle
made for the,
made the motion. That is region then.
Okay.
I think we have to vote on the amendment first?
This
and then
is,
Yes.
we're
Yes.
talking about the amendment.
All right. All those in favor of the amendment, say aye. All those opposed to the amendment? Tillman, are you abstaining?
I said aye.
Oh, sorry. Okay, so all in favor of the amendment for the regional school committee?
In favor again? You're taking it again?
No, I'm reporting back. Everyone was all in favor.
All right.
It was unanimous.
Was unanimous.
was
Sorry.
That's what we're looking for.
Yes.
So, all those in favor of Union 26?
So, I'm sorry, Irv, we don't need to, the motion was made for the region and the amendment was voted on for the region. So now the region needs to vote on the motion. The Union
Whoa,
26,
wait.
Union 26 would then vote on probably the amended motion when someone makes that motion.
Did we already vote on the amendment?
Yes,
The union of the region did.
yes.
And
Because
what you're saying is that now we come back to the region
yes, voting on the motion,
to vote on the motion,
right.
and then we come back to the union.
Then Union 26 could probably vote on the amended motion, not,
That's one thing.
wouldn't have, yeah.
They just need to.
Yes.
One vote instead of two.
I'm not gonna argue with that, because I don't have time.
So, all right, so we are now voting on our amended motion. All those in favor, please raise your hand. Excellent, unanimous at the regional school committee. Thank you.
Jennifer?
I move the amended motion for Union 26.
Second.
Who was the second?
Margaret?
Thank you.
All right, any discussion of that, which we can go with, and God knows. Anyway, all those in favor?
Aye.
It's unanimous. All right, so Union 26 is off the clock.
So things
Did-
are, I'm sorry.
Katie?
Now that we've passed that motion, can I make a recommendation as you continue researching to maybe seek out further detail about how and to whom, what databases they use to advertise their announcements?
Databases to advertise their, like
Like, how do they
posting?
publicize
Yeah, okay,
those?
that's, I'm pretty sure that's in the proposals, but yes, we can do that, yes.
Margaret?
I would like to ask, since we need to have criteria in the RFP, feedback from all of you about what you think are the important things to have for criteria would be really helpful at this point. So
That was
you've
what I was
given us
saying.
one,
Yeah.
yeah.
Jennifer?
Might I suggest, before people do that, that we confirm whether an RFP is required? I wouldn't want people to start doing the work of sending us stuff if it isn't needed.
Margaret?
If we're gonna have the RFP out and come back with several recommendations at the next meeting, I don't think we can wait to ask this group for criteria until we know about that, because that means we couldn't ask for the criteria for another 2 weeks.
May I suggest, that if there are people who would like to contribute criteria to the search, then that you would get in touch with Jennifer. Rather than, I mean, if you're gonna suggest criteria, in other words, I'm saying, is it possible, why would we need to sit around here and give you criteria if criteria could be sent, if it's not breaking any rules? Sarah Bess?
I think if we are going to put out an RFP, the two committees that are here need to decide what is important to put on that RFP, so we know who we are soliciting it to.
All right, so,
Can I speak to that?
yeah, well, why don't you talk, because it's,
Well, I just want to speak to that point, and that was in the motion, we empowered the subcommittee to develop an RFP. So, one of the reasons is that, that's a more efficient process than having the whole committee be involved in that writing process, number one. Number two, I agree that if we aren't going to need it, it might be more work, adding more work to something that we're not gonna end up using. But I would like to ask, can we all be informed once Doug finds out whether or not an RFP is gonna be needed? Is that something that can just be sent out by email, just to let us know which direction the process is gonna go?
and I guess I hear what other people are saying in terms of expediency. but we've already voted on something. And now what I'm hearing, well, maybe we need to give you more information so that you can the committee can make decisions and do that tonight. Anyway, before we go on, Roger,
Well, the interesting thing is, whatever we put in the RFP, or the RFQ, or whatever we want to call it, is what we want anyway. And the beauty of that is, it's a list. I believe it really is a list of things we are looking for, concepts, whatever you'd like to call it. And I guess one of the things that would be important to me would be to spend some time just think about, well, what do I want in a superintendent? What am I looking for?
No, we're talking about the criteria for the firm.
The firm.
Oh, for the firm. Oh.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
all right, so,
But it's for the firm you're talking about?
Yeah.
That'll take it'll take a little more research, but okay.
see, I had assumed
Okay,
that
my
we
bad.
were giving the subcommittee the ability to deal with the entire search firm and then come back to us and say, hey, here's a search firm or search firms, and we would like, and here's why we are supporting them, and then we would then, the entire committees would make a decision. Now, if that is correct, now, then I'm sort of like thinking, well, I'm confused, because if we're already empowering you to do that, whatever information, resources, et cetera, you need to, from this committee tonight, then needs to be identified. In other words, if you're saying, hey, we need some more guidance from you, then you need to really let us know that, because I'm not sure if you're saying that or not. Tillman, you have your hand up.
I want to note that we seem to spend more time discussing the process than it would have taken for a few people to brainstorm and just throw out some ideas for the subcommittee to consider.
Yes, it would be if we weren't in committee, but that would, anyway, here's where we are. We made a decision on what the subcommittee is being charged with. And the subcommittee will be coming back to us with recommendations based upon what the motion said. Now, other than that, I'm hearing that, and I'm not sure if this is the entire wish or desire of the subcommittee, that you are asking, want to ask us, or proposing to ask us if we would give input into the criteria. Is that correct? Margaret, you're in it.
My reason for saying what I did was I would hate to see us come back to the next meeting with search firms for you to look at, and we have not asked the questions of the search firms that you want us to ask, because then we have more questions to answer. Maybe the solution is, if you have things that you feel are really important for us to find out about, you email us.
Would there be a possibility that people could reach out to one of the four of us, so then it wouldn't be
I
open meeting
suggested that.
laws? Not just to one person, but they could choose one of us to reach out to? Or would that, I don't know.
I don't think that's a deliberation, so I think they could, I mean, sure, it could go to one of us, but I don't think
It's not
that's a
a-
deliberation.
It's not a deliberation if you're just receiving suggestions.
So they can all go to one person and it would be,
Could go to one person or whatever.
Or all four.
all four of us.
Katie,
I just want to go back to Tillman's point, where I think for the sake of transparency, just to have a quick discussion now about things that we think about in terms of what we want from our search committee. And just to clarify, the reason why I want to know what the search firms use in terms of disseminating the post is to know the diversity of the candidates that may or may not be may or may not have access to the post.
Jennifer,
I appreciate Margaret's suggestion. And I hear where it's coming from. However, at our last meeting, these two bodies voted to empower the subcommittee to recommend a search firm. At that time, we didn't talk about criteria or what we were looking for in a search firm. And I actually think it's not as complicated or confusing, or it doesn't require as much input as you would think. We all met with the search firms and we asked them questions, and it wasn't that, it was pretty straightforward. So I think if anyone has any input, they should email all four of us. In the meantime, I think the motion has empowered the four of us to develop the RFP, and I think that's sufficient.
we can move on. William?
I was just gonna say, would it be possible for the four of us to share the two proposals? So then, when we come to vote, all the committee members would have seen those proposals and could have dived into it, and if they had any specific questions, they could come to the four of us?
Not until we find out about
Right, I can see it as an efficiency measure. After you found out all this other information, you could send it to us, so that when we did come to
Like, we already have the proposals.
What I'm saying,
Right.
yes, but we don't have them.
Right.
And I'm saying you could,
We can't send the proposals out till after an RFP if we needed to, okay,
right,
I understand.
all right. We're finished with this item. All right,
I think
What-
it's the timeline.
the timeline.
There's more to present.
Go ahead.
So, yeah, so continuing with the memo, the next item was a revised timeline. So, I mean, we basically discussed that, like, each of the search firms that we talked to had ideas and suggestions about timelines. They all felt that we are in good shape to find someone by July 1st. They had different practices of how long to keep the posting up for. Some said 6 weeks, some said 8 weeks. But basically, we kind of revised the timeline, but it still ends up with an offer made in March, April, finalist accepts in April, first day, July. So like the stuff in between, I think we thought was going to be somewhat dependent on which search firm we choose. So we did revise the timeline based on these committees' inputs from last time, but it's not that different.
April, May 23, finalists accept.
That should say
offer.
24.
Yes, right.
Sorry, that's probably me.
The time machine?
That's right, it's, right.
Yeah.
So, are we finished with this?
Yeah. And then lastly, we have the form that was created by Margaret that we went over to submit, solicit volunteers to serve on the search committee. Is that link clickable, Doug?
Let's find out.
Yes.
Oh, great. I think the one piece of input I've gotten so far is that the choices, if you scroll down, need to be multiple choice. Maybe I used the wrong term, Margaret. I might have said radio buttons, but I meant you need to be able to select more than one. And the way it's set up right now, you can only select one, but that was always our intention, of
thought
course.
it was.
I might have used the wrong term. I might have
Well,
said radio buttons, but I meant
that-
check boxes.
yeah.
But that's
I-
definitely something we can.
I thought it was
fix.
set up for multiple choice. No,
That's
you tried it and it didn't work.
It doesn't work.
Okay, all right. I
So
will
it's
change it.
it's a pretty simple form. It just collects a name, email, and then check boxes for the groups that we landed on last time, and people can choose as many as apply to them. And then just a short 2 or 3 sentences about why you want to serve. So that's basically it, and we can, we talked about having a version of this available on paper at the district offices, at the school buildings if necessary, and as well as at any community sessions that we hold. But this is our suggestion.
Well, anyone want to make any? Katie?
I guess just going back to discussion we had earlier about anonymity and maybe not wanting to disclose certain descriptors, is there any way that you could avoid requiring a name and just have email so that if someone was interested and wanted to create some email account for this purpose, they could do that.
Sarah Bess?
I think we're gonna need to know who people are, so they can participate in the search committee.
And people would come, but I don't know if you're going to specifically ask them to share their identities at that meeting. Right. So why would we need someone's name to tie them back to their identity if that's something that they want to protect? When all they would really need is an email for them to, you could get in touch with them by way of an email, which they can create for this purpose if they want to protect their identity, and then they would show up at the meetings.
Right. So, there's obviously a process and a procedure around what you're talking about, Katie, because for me, I'm thinking, all right, we emailed the person, they show up at the meeting, but we don't know who they are. We just know them by their email address.
They'll introduce themselves there, but they don't have to share their identities there.
Interesting. Anything's possible.
Well, it's,
So,
again,
no, I just-
protecting any
Understand what I'm
identity that
saying.
they don't want to
It's
out.
something that, when a person like me or anyone else say, well, they show up, and people are saying, well, who's here? I know that we start saying, here are the people who applied. And so, and the people, when you come to this particular person, you don't say this person's name, you only say person who was associated with this email. Is that correct? Because that's the only way you have, if they're showing up at a meeting and you invited them to a meeting, you're inviting them with their email descriptor. Go ahead, Gabrielle.
Well, I really like their identities in order to select a diverse committee that, you know, covers a lot of the bases. But we also don't want to be forcing people to out particular things about themselves if they don't want to. If you select based on these two criteria, which is, you know, the identities and then an explanation of what they'll contribute, and you only have their email, once you make the decisions, you can go to the email and say, we'd like you to be on the committee, and then you can say, could you please give us your name so that we can make a committee roster. You know, at that point, you can find out their name without necessarily needing to link identity information with name. You're using the email address as kind of an intermediary, a bridge for that.
Understood, and it's all being done within a committee who's making these selections.
If I may
Doug
offer.
has
Yeah.
something to
So the only concern I have is that, if you want, and so one of the criteria that you wanted to, one of the things that was important to the group was to make sure that these groups were broadly represented in your committee. If you disconnect the names from the listing, you can't tell. You could all end up with 12 ARPS educators and none of the other categories that you're interested in because you won't have collected that information. In other words, the committee that reviews and helps select the membership of the search committee needs to know names and categories if they want a broad spectrum of people. If you don't have that connection between those things, and again, it's limited to just the committee that selects the search committee, there's not a way to guarantee that you have broad representation.
You wouldn't need a name to know that there's broad representation.
No. What I'm saying is, like, not everybody that applies is going to get selected for a committee. So if you have 1,000 people apply, you've got to narrow it down to, say, 20.
Yeah.
If you don't have names and associated categories that they're in, you could end up with 20 people that all have the same category.
You have an
No, but
email
you have
address.
the email
You
address
treat
is-
them as an email
Right,
address,
but if you still
not as a
disconnect the
name.
email address from the person's name, you can't
Well,
discern that.
But we're not saying to disconnect the email address from the name. The email address would be a unique identifier, but it doesn't necessarily need to tell you.
So then you email the 25 candidates that you want to be on your committee, you say you have been selected to be on the committee. I think the problem that you run into is if then only 15 people show up, and then now you don't know how representative your committee is, and the only way of figuring it out is to say, okay, I need you 15 to go back and reply to an email saying, yes, I showed up. And then then you get the 15 candidates that said, yes, I show up, you have their email addresses, you can go back and figure out which groups you have represented. But it's a little clumsy, it can be done. But if not all the people who you've selected to be on the committee show up, then it's a little bit more complicated. But I'm still saying it can be done.
Tillman.
I'd like to offer a counterpoint to that perspective. I appreciate the importance of anonymity, but in this case, we're looking for volunteers to participate, and we're, I think, implicitly assuming that those volunteers advocate for the identity that they're representing. So I'm a non-native speaker, a native speaker of language other than English. I feel that then I should represent that perspective on the committee, and during the discussion of candidates, I would likely bring out that perspective and therefore disclose that identity of mine. Therefore, I'm not too concerned about volunteers offering their identity in this form and disclosing it, and therefore I think we should go with the simpler process.
If I am a student and I identify as questioning or LGBTQIA and don't feel safe, I want to be able to volunteer and yet still feel protected to do so.
William.
I was gonna say that I think we also did put the confidentiality statement in the top. And if I remember correctly, it was gonna be the four of us on the SSS that would decide who was gonna be on the search committee. So I feel like that with the confidentiality and the small group of the selection committee, we'd be able to make sure it is confidential, that information, without having to remove the names.
Yeah. My only concern with this document is its length. You're asking for volunteers and the number of things they have to go through in order to volunteer in terms of not only their email address, their name, but also all the list of things of
They're just clicking.
there is a lot of data out there. Is that the shorter you ask, the shorter form, and the less amount of information that a person has to get who is going to volunteer, the more volunteers you will get. There's a correlation between. I'm just saying, I'm concerned with it. I'm not telling you to remove it or not. I'm saying I'm concerned that it's too long. Anyway, anyone else? Sarah Bass?
I actually think the list of categories of people is great. They're not answering any questions about things. They're just saying, like, I would go down and say, I am a middle school parent, I'm a high school parent, I am a community member. Like, you're just going right down. You can do this form in 3 minutes.
I'm just going from my experience. Someone give me that, and I would say, well, I'm not. Jennifer.
I'm going back to Katie's suggestion. I admit I'm struggling with this. I hear where it's coming from, and it is something that we should think about and be concerned about. We do have a statement. I assume that you saw, Katie, that it does say that this information will be kept confidential. We're not going to publish to the search committee members which boxes each member checks. We're just going to, the search subcommittee is going to make sure as many boxes as possible are represented. The idea of making name optional, I think is what you're saying. It does add adds a level of complexity, but I also think it doesn't actually accomplish the idea of keeping that information confidential, because someone could create an email address like amherststudent@gmail.com and not put their name, and they could say, I'm a student and I'm LGBTQIA+, and we could say, okay, dear Amherst student, will you please be on the committee? We want you because of the boxes that you checked. And then when that person shows up, they'll have to identify themselves as, hi, I'm amherststudent@gmail.com.
No, they don't.
No.
How will we know?
They'll say,
How-
I'm Amelie.
And then how will we know that the people who show up to be on the committee are the people we invited to be on the committee.
Because only they know where and when to meet you.
But what if only one person doesn't share their name? Then we'll know. That's what I'm saying, I'm struggling with it, because I hear where it's coming from, and I think that's a valid point, but in practice, and I also take Tillman's point that if you want to, we want representation from these groups, we want the perspective of those groups. And if you're opting in, if you, yeah, I don't know, I'm really struggling with
All
it.
right, go ahead, Gabrielle.
So I have a suggestion, and that is something that we do in, human subjects research when you're trying to anonymize, and that is that you can have an intermediary be the person, so leave it like this, have an intermediary person be, like Debbie, be the person who downloads the data, but only gives you guys, or whoever's selecting the subcommittee, the information without the names. So then we're making the decisions based on the data, not the names, but we have a way of then somebody putting the names back together with the emails. So, then we can refer to people by their names, but we don't know which name actually identified as which thing. But we do have that information already linked, but we have an intermediary who's the one person who has the ability to link that data.
All right, so my assumption is that we're giving feedback on this particular form in terms of, back to the SSS, in terms of the form. We're not coming to any kind of decision on it, or making any kind of votes on it. We're just giving input. Is that correct? All right, so,
And the input right now is whether or not to leave the name
right, and so,
in there.
that's
For you guys to decide.
Jennifer and then Margaret.
I like that suggestion, and I'm wondering what others think about it. And I'm wondering if it addresses the concerns about keeping identities confidential.
Margaret.
I think it's a good suggestion, because the email will tie the data, once the people are chosen, it will be very simple then to go back and tie the email address to the name. I think it's a good solution.
Well, any other discussion? I just, as I've said, I would rather have gone for brevity in terms of length. But that's only my objection, but I am not on that committee. Gabrielle.
I have a question/suggestion on a different aspect of the form, not the discussion of whether we include the name or not. It's actually, I guess, two separate things. One is there's a button in here for community member, and I'm wondering, isn't everybody going to be a community member? And if so, did we actually mean to say something like community member who is not otherwise associated with ARPS? Maybe that was more
That's,
along the lines, because otherwise everybody would click that.
Okay, ARPS.
And then along with that is, I just want to throw them both out there. There's identify as Black, and then there's identify as BIPOC, and identify as LGBTQIA+. BIPOC is Black, Indigenous, People of Color. I'm Hispanic. I don't see a particular category for Hispanic. I'm not, the whole people of color thing always confuses me, because I'm not a particular color. So I wonder if you either want to separate out all the categories, or if you want to go with the one that's under that identifies member of historically marginalized groups, and then maybe put parentheses such as So I just, having both Black and BIPOC, but nothing else, I think could be problematic.
I certainly agree with that. And also, when you look at member of underrepresented groups,
Historically marginalized.
and then you have both BIPOC up there and identify as black, those two together usually are put in that category of underrepresented groups. In other words, I've already said what I need to say. All right, so, Margaret.
I was just going to say that the identify as black was a suggestion that came from a community member. That's why it's there. I'm not saying it should stay or not stay, that's just the reason that it was separated out.
Wow. All right, so, because I look at it and say I identify as BIPOC. I also identify as black, but I identify as BIPOC because it's black, indigenous people of color.
And that's why you could check both.
Yeah, I'm checking both. But if you're checking both, what is the reason for checking both?
Because not everyone will check both.
Right. All right, but this is not my thing. This is yours to deal with. I see all kinds of issues with it, but it's not mine. And in other words, this committee is empowered to do these things. And we've empowered you. And all I can say is these things that I see, I have issues with.
It's just feedback.
And that's, so it's just my feedback and that's it. It's not. So any other discussion on this so we can move on? Katie.
I'm aware this is a regional committee, but I often have the mindset to have it in English as well as in Spanish, because I live at Fort River and there's the Caminantes program there. So I just wanted to ask if this will be produced in various languages.
Usually
have to
that is usually the case for this school district to do that. Roger.
I just want to say that when you think of diversity, and this is probably the wrong word, it's messy in that there are so many parts. There are so many parts that make us who we are. And as far as I'm concerned, I looked at the list and said, ooh, this is long. But if I'm committed to getting a superintendent that I want, that I feel like I can help pick or at least question, I'll go and do it. So, and I was just going to ask, is this going to be in multiple languages? And now I got my answer for that. It is what it is. And I think, while you have issues, I looked at it and said, yeah, well, I'm black. And if I got picked, everybody would know. But I respect your point as well, and I love the way we came up with a methodology. If you're saying, oh, only one person will know, if the subcommittee decides to do that. So yeah, it is complicated.
All right, so
I'm done.
All right, so one last thing. Understand, it has always been said that those people who are marginalized, who don't participate in government, and those who are underrepresented, those people who may have less education than the average, have issues with large numbers of things to make choices on. They have issues with it. It does not mean we have to change it. Just recognize that that may be a barrier to some people. All right, any more? All right. Jennifer, anything else on you?
So then there is also the draft of the job description, which actually the search committee didn't get to go over as a committee. I believe everyone had the opportunity to review it. It was drafted based on the most recent ARPS superintendent job description and a current job description for a current opening in a Massachusetts district. Interestingly, several superintendent positions that are currently open in Massachusetts don't even have a full job description. They have like a district profile, number of students, programs, information about the districts, but I could only find one active one that actually had full job description, like a multi-page. This is what is expected of a superintendent, strangely. So, that's something, but which is like, we should still do it because that's the right thing to do. But anyway, so I don't know. And so I guess the other thing I want to say, in talking with the, sorry, I lost my train of thought. Anyway, maybe this is something that we can also come back to the committees with next time, is reviewing the draft job description.
Right, yeah, yes, I mean, the only problem I have with it, not problem, question that I had is, I would have preferred that it would have been put in narrative form rather than just bullet points. For instance, and I was going to send you, I was looking at other job descriptions of superintendent. This is one from, I think it's somewhere in Vermont. And it's all in narrative form. When I say narrative, it's not bullet points. It says, for instance, the person in this position possesses and uses executive level management, organizational planning, communication, technical and conflict management skills to ensure that all core knowledge areas are carried out effectively to meet the goals and objectives set forth annually by the school board. Then it goes on. In other words, all I'm saying is, look at this, and I'll send it to you. It's in narrative form. It more humanizes it rather than putting it in terms of bullets. It's more readable and more approachable by a candidate or by us who are going to be reading this. Anyway, it's just a suggestion. I will send it to you. Gabrielle.
In job searches that I've been involved with, either as a candidate or as part of a search committee, I find that having a bullet type list makes it easier to develop a rubric and then be able to use that rubric to, basically compare apples to apples when looking at candidates. It also, as a candidate, when there's a list that's sort of more list-oriented, it makes it easier to write to the actual job description, as in, I meet, these sorts of criteria, and this is what I've done that demonstrates this, that, and the other. But I've generally seen at least an initial section that's narrative, that's more descriptive, perhaps, of, the district and the kind of situation that the person would be going into, and then kind of follows with the job descriptions. The bullets, I mean. I have a question, though, related to this, and that is kind of connected to our previous discussion. If there's a job description that we're all in favor of, but we haven't yet hired a firm, are we as a district empowered to go ahead and post that job description, like while we get a firm on board and get them working on things?
Interesting.
Just wondering if it can be
See,
done in
I
parallel.
was thinking that the SSS and the search committee would be dealing with that particular kind of issue.
I think that the discussion we've had in the subcommittee is that the search committee will be responsible for receiving the applications, reviewing the applications, and making the recommendations
Is that
along
it?
the way. We did not talk about having the search committee develop the job description. I don't know if we should have, but we,
No, I mean, the SSS, whatever this
Yes.
job description is that we're,
Subcommittee.
the
Right.
subcommittee that we're working on right now. I'm just wondering if it's for expediency's sake, whether these two processes can proceed in parallel, such as if we all come to the subcommittee comes to an agreement on the job description, can it be posted while we're still looking for a firm?
Interesting.
Every firm
Before
that-
before you go, Anna, one of the things that you said is really critical, because I didn't occur to me until you mentioned it, is at some point a rubric is going to have to be developed. in order to evaluate all the candidates. Anyway, Anna, go ahead.
So every search firm that we talked to suggested meeting with the community, doing our focus groups to figure out what kind of candidate that they want before posting the job description. So the search committee is really just putting the framework on the job description and putting some key things in there that we think are sort of essential, and probably developing that background section, saying this is what Amherst is like, this is what you're going to be, and
Right.
some of that is gonna be added to once we've talked to the community and done the focus groups, and I think the search firms will help craft that more specific job proposal. So posting it in advance, that would likely just end up with two different versions of the job description out there, and it probably wouldn't be that beneficial.
Before we go, is it possible to go get that timeline back there, back up there, in terms of your timeline? Because that's what,
Sure, I think Doug can do that.
And if I can say something about the timeline, I feel like each search firm that we decide to choose in the end is gonna have some tweaks to the timeline. So we kind of left the timeline a little bit vague in that the search firm and the committee is really gonna have to recraft the timeline more so than this.
right, and the only reason I asked what to be brought up, because when someone was just talking about, of things that really, would fit into where you're going to be in the timeline. So all of the criteria, the putting out the job descriptions and all of that, that fits into that timeline. That timeline feeds back into your process that you are proposing back to us. We've already said that you are the group, SSS, is to do this. Katie?
If I can recommend, as you are developing this job description, just to write maybe in more broader strokes. For example, I just look at 1 and 2 in terms of the amount of time that people have spent teaching versus being a superintendent. I think you could broaden that by just saying significant experience, because if I'm an applicant, I will interpret that as I may, but it's only until you get the feedback from your search committee group, or more specifically teachers and others in the district, who will hone in on what numbers actually would be good for them. That's just one example, but maybe keeping it more broad and less specific until you do the work in your subgroups and get the focus groups and all that data that would then determine what that rubric would look like.
Right, I just want people to keep in mind that timeline, because that timeline had, in terms of job qualification, some of it was up in, is in November.
That's
So,
why I'm
in
saying,
other words,
yeah,
to spend any time now talking about that does not seem to be appropriate, given that that's in November.
but that's what I'm saying. If we are with the goal in mind of getting this posted by November, December, it's better to post it with broad strokes. Therefore, we would have time to do our research and get the more specifics
Yeah, I
later
understand,
on.
I understand that, but I'm saying that seems to me, that's not something that we would be needing to come to any kind of decision with or discuss tonight, given the time frame that they're talking about. But, by the way, I got a time check here, it's almost 9 o'clock. I wanna move past this, and then we're gonna have to make a decision on something else. So, anyone else want?
I was just going to say that perhaps the reason Jennifer found only very non-specific job descriptions is that people want to get the job description out, as you suggested, perhaps in broad strokes, and then the details will come later. I don't know, but maybe that's one reason.
Tillman.
Sorry, I know that you want to move on, but I feel that while the SSS is working on refining the draft, which I think will be important even before the community sessions, that we should keep in mind that these job descriptions are also advertisements for the position to make it attractive, and so I think that first part is really important, and I'm not sure that necessarily needs to be developed in a community session, but it can be refined there, so I think we could put something there. And following the previous comment, I would like to suggest to also split qualifications between required and preferred. So obviously the being able to get the state certification as a superintendent is a requirement, whereas other things are preferences, and I think that way you can get it a little bit broader and not be pinned down by certain numbers.
Jennifer?
Okay, thank you. Thank you for all the input. I think it's good to get this input now, even though we're ahead of the game. It's good to be ahead of the game, so thank you for all that input. So there's a job description, and then there's a job posting. And the job posting is going to include more than just the job description. So, Gabriella, you brought up an interesting point, like if our job description is finalized, or when it is, can we just post it? Without even if we haven't gotten a search firm yet, and I hadn't really thought of that. But so, you know, like with any job posting, apply for this job posting is going to include more than just a job description. That's going to be part of it. One of the things I liked about McPherson and Jacobson is that they have a standard 4 questions that they ask in community sessions. I'm going somewhere with this, which is that they ask the community, what's great about living in this area? What's great about your district? And then what are you looking for? What are the qualities, characteristics you're looking for in a superintendent? I really liked those first 2 questions because, to Tillman's point, they use it to come up with a job posting and an introductory narrative about why the Pioneer Valley is great, why Amherst is great, why this district is great. So that's going to be all part of the job posting, which is going to require input from the community. So I just wanted to put all that out there.
All right. We're done. Unless you want, someone else wants to.
Thank you, sir,
Don't
subcommittee,
forget to
for all the
adjourn
work
Union
you've done.
26, 'cause
Thank you so much.
All right.
Thank you.
I spoke out of turn.
No, that's all right. So, I will entertain a motion for adjournment of Union 26.
I move to adjourn Union 26.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Unanimous. Thank you, Margaret, for
Good
your
night.
patience.
Should I
Hey, by the way, when did we, I mean,
Are you sure?
there is a time when we need to say, hey, we're gonna keep going.
2.5 hours.
Huh?
It's 2.5 hours
Just right now.
Which is,
right now.
this is now region, so you need to raise that issue.
So, 2 things. I suggest we take a 5-minute break and then return to finish the rest of our regional business. And also, we have a policy that says if we are going past 2.5 hours, that we need to have a motion to extend the meeting for another half hour. So we have hit our 2.5 hour mark. So I move that the Regional School Committee extend our meeting by 30 minutes.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you. All right, so we will come back at 9:10 and continue our meeting. Thank you.
12th, 2023.
I think first we should see if anyone has any changes. Or move them and then,
Second.
You can do it either.
all right, perfect. Gabriella?
I would like my name spelled with just the one L in my first name.
Any other edits? All in favor of approving minutes from October 12th?
Aye.
Unanimous. Thank you. Public comment?
There's a public. My God, you're patient.
Keith McFarland, teacher here at the high school, APA representative, and I'll try to be as brief as possible. Negotiations wrapped up in the spring, but the union has yet to receive a finalized contract. So we respectfully encourage the district and/or district council to complete the contract as expediently as possible and be able to put the contract in members' hands.
Interesting.
Thank you.
My turn?
Doug?
Okay. Couple of things. I'll start first with a broad statement about communication. One thing I want to remind committee members of is that we have a policy, you guys have a policy, and also just a courtesy to staff to reach out to them through me. So we don't want to directly email principals, teachers, et cetera, with questions that are from the committee. We want to be respectful of their time and effort and run it through me first. If you pose the question to me first and I've been delayed in responding to you, then reach out again. Don't hesitate. I think if you don't have my number, you can call me. Certainly, you can call the office. The other thing I will also say to that point is, I was actually speaking earlier today with staff about how we might triage those to not have it be silence from me. So I often will pause to consider carefully what my response will be, and not just immediately go, thanks for input, and because I might forget to ever get back to it. So that's part of the style that I have personally, but at the same time, I think that there is some sort of response. So I may have staff triage those a little bit to give you a little bit of a it's been seen and it's being thought about kind of response. So I don't want to leave people hanging necessarily. Some things have taken a little bit of time. But I will also say it's been extraordinarily busy. And we can't always respond in a really super timely way. And that's also part of the reason to be conscientious of staff. And so working through me to get to them. So I just want to make that point and also just speak to the fact that we're working on, sort of communication strategies generally. I think the other thing I'll just say broadly about communication is we're often asked for a lot of different sort of feedback and input. We're going to keep our focus as a district on communicating about the kids in the schools and not other things that, while they certainly impact us and we're very conscientious of that, we want to keep our focus on the kids and what's best for the kids. And the staff that support those kids. So that's where and how our responses will generally be focused and voiced. We obviously have clearly sort of individual opinions about a lot of things and maybe in concurrence with a lot of our community. And I don't want to diminish that or diminish other aspects, but we are an organization that's going to be focused on, and our communication is going to be focused on largely internally. In other words, how are we operating? How are we making sure to keep kids safe and to keep them ready to learn, regardless of what that is? So I just, broad brushstrokes there I want to mention to folks, generally speaking. And then next topic, Summit Open House is on Thursday night. So if you're wanting to sort of pop in and see how Summit does its open house, they'll be here Thursday evening. So the high school and middle school have already had theirs. Great attendance at those. I was able to get to both of those. but Summit will have theirs on Thursday night, so I want to mention that that's coming up. A quick update on some capital items. So we have needed to move this a little closer, get a little feedback there. I don't want to have it start squealing too much there. So our middle school roof has been in need of replacement for several years. We've been participating and applying to the MSBA, which is the Massachusetts School Building Authority. They have a program for accelerated repair, which is where they provide some support for things like roofs, windows and doors, etc. We've been applying for several years unsuccessfully. Each year we apply, they sort of move the goalpost on how many years old your roof has to be. So we're in a place, and if you've ever been in the middle school lately, or you have students that have been in that middle school, even under the best of circumstances, it's a pretty leaky roof in some spots. We're gonna do a small scale amount of repair, and we put a request for bids out regarding that. We have successful bidders, and we're moving into the contract phase. I think they may actually have been meeting either today or tomorrow to kind of button down a few things and work on a schedule. But what we're hopeful is that we'll have crews working on our middle school roof to do some extensive repair work in the next few weeks, literally potentially before November, but most likely probably in November. When we get more details about the actual schedule, we'll share that with teachers so that if they look out their windows and people are walking around on the roof, it's not a surprise to them. But I did want to update you all, and so you can also communicate back to your committees, your communities, I should say, that sort of intermediate repair work that we're going to do on the roof at the middle school to help it last a little bit longer with a little less damage to the internal parts of the building until we can get a full roof replacement is getting underway. I just have one other thing that I want to make sure to mention to the group, and I'll take questions after that, is and I've talked about that with you all in more individual terms, but I want to make this more publicly a statement about an approach we're going to take. So under advice of counsel, the Title IX reports, the most recent investigative report from Just Training, Inc., which is led by Ed Mitnick. We've received those reports. We're still in process on Title IX, but in consideration with both the investigator, Mr. Mitnick, and our counsel, all of those are considered to be personnel records, which means they're private, and so we've expressed that publicly a number of times. Certainly there are calls and questions and a desire for some more information to be made more public. The approach I'm considering and working on currently, and it'll take a little bit to go through, and partly because we need to finish some of our Title IX process, is to pull out some of the findings, or most of the findings, as best we can to decouple them from individuals, and talk about what did or did not happen that should have or should not have happened, and build essentially a frame of the things that occurred without being specific to the particulars of the cases, but yet are instructive to us as far as what are our actions, what are our corrective actions, what are our process moving forward to prevent these things. It may include things that weren't substantiated by virtue of research, because even without it being substantiated, it might still be the fact that an investigator wasn't able to necessarily confirm or credit particular testimony or questions. That doesn't mean we shouldn't be vigilant about preventing those kinds of things from being even presumed to have happened, even if we don't have specific actions that we need to take relative to individuals who may or may not have. Pause there. See if we can try to reduce the feedback a little bit. Sorry. So I think that is not the same as releasing reports. At the same time, again, we're operating under the premise that they're all personnel records, and personnel records are confidential, and that they should remain so. At the same time, I also recognize that you guys have expressed this, as well as the larger population, is wanting some more information about, what happened and what do we do. And so I think there's a way to kind of construct that in a productive way, and focuses us as a district, you guys as a school committee, but also the district at large in what are our next steps, what are our corrective actions, what is our process and procedural changes that we're going to make to sort of mitigate or eliminate these kinds of things happening in the future. So it's imperfect relative to sort of seeing the particular details, but it also hopefully will be constructive and forward-looking and and at the same time preserving those things that need to be confidential as confidential. So I just wanted to express to the broader group, and more importantly, kind of to the public at large, that that approach is the one I'm taking at the moment relative to that. And of course, we'll run drafts of this through council to see if they take the lens of it and see if there's anything that they see as problematic with regard to that. So it will take a little bit to compile it. I mean, and also, like I said, we'll go through the review process with council around that a little bit to make sure that we're keeping ourselves from any undue risk from a liability standpoint. But I did want to update you on that. And so I think that's the last thing specifically for tonight. So I'm happy to answer any questions people have.
Gabriella? With respect to the last point, of making some of the information public and discussing process, more importantly, that came out of that, couple of questions. The first is, does that statement about it being personnel records and therefore completely confidential also apply to the report that we discussed in executive session last week?
Yes.
To that entire report?
Yes.
Okay. So then that leads to my next question / comment, which is that, how soon can we begin to have this conversation? Because it will take a while to compile, to go through that and compile data about process, about policies, about what went wrong, about what can be, what can be changed. And I think that that's important to do. And it should be done. It should be done thoroughly. On the other hand, I also know that the community has, reasonably so, been wanting to know what kinds of actions we are considering, what kinds of findings, independent of individual people's names perhaps, but what kinds of findings there are. Part of it is a safety issue. They want to know, exactly what went on to the extent that their own kids are safe or, should be in these schools, that sort of thing. So I'm wondering to what extent, how long is that going to take, and to what extent is there anything that we can discuss while that more extensive compilation process is taking place?
So I think I'll answer that in a couple ways. So for one thing, the prior superintendent in August put together a list of some action steps that the district's going to take. So I think that was a beginning phase of this process, and so those are still in process, and there's some very directive things regarding that are part and parcel of, and will be folded into this. I think that for me, and some of it will depend a little bit on how the Title IX steps that we're taking, so there's very formal sort of steps that have to occur, so that'll dictate a little bit about how quickly we move forward with some aspects of it. But I would be hopeful, and this is a hope and not a locked in any way, the Regional School Committee meets on the 31st of October, which is a couple weeks from tonight. I'm doing the math right? 14 and 17, 31, right? I'd love to have a sort of first draft to you by then, if possible. The other thing I will say that will not take as much time is that there are a number of aspects of response that are really just reminders of existing process, procedure, and policy we already have. And it's about just reiterating what should have been happening all along, potentially, and then there'll be refinements or additions to that. I think that there are, and I've said this in a number of different settings, it's like there's some checks and balances that we might need to be putting in place to guarantee that certain things happen or processes are fully followed, and that it's not overly dependent on individual responsibility, so that if an individual will be largely responsible, but yet there's an opportunity for a check to make sure that it did happen. So we were talking earlier about sort of the anonymizing the names and having sort of one person have that information, and that's fine in a sort of one-off circumstance because it's easily sort of identified, did they or did they not really sort of take care of the task. But I think that there are places where we'll discover that we should have some other redundancy and some overlap, and so that's some of my thinking at this point. I think we'll get into more detail and as we develop it. And the other thing is, it'll be an iterative process. So there'll be things I'll come with suggestions about what I think, and then there'll be obviously your input and feedback that you'll want to provide as well that will influence some of the sort of actual steps that we might take.
Anna?
So I wanted to make one comment. Are you aware that the Shutesbury Elementary School recently replaced their roof, a battle which they have been fighting for probably almost as many years as the middle school? And they were able to obtain a grant for a large portion of the roof. So if you weren't aware, you might just get in touch with Shutesbury and see if they have any inside information about where you can apply for more money. If it's helpful at all.
Yeah, I'm a little aware of that. Certainly, I think we'll touch base again and see if there's anything that could be helpful in that regard. But just for informational purposes, the MSBA process, much like the elementary school in Amherst, has a fairly significant reimbursement. So it's kind of like splitting the cost, just to give you rough sort of numbers. The roof at the middle school will probably be on the order of $5 million, maybe more by the time we go to replace it. So if they can carry, or maybe 6, if they can carry 3 of those 6, that would be awesome. I don't know if we can get other grants to cover that level of support. And if we have to carry a greater amount, it'll significantly impact our capital process moving, and other things that we might want to do in and around our building.
Stunningly, I think the Shutesbury roof was almost as expensive, so,
Yeah.
I don't know. My second was, I think we talked about this a little bit before, along with sort of the process, things that you're going to be talking about. Will there be, a notification of whether and the number of staff that have been either substantially reduced or moved or fired as a result of the Title IX investigations? Or, I know, you might not be able to give details, but it seems like you at least would be able to say, so-and-so was fired because of the findings in the Title IX report. And without giving any details, just say, yes, we did an investigation and the result was this person was fired.
Actually, we can't. So what we can answer is if somebody asks a question about whether someone is employed with the district, we can answer that. We cannot give any detail about how that employment status changed or why that status changed. That's all part of their personnel record. So, to do so would be a violation of their personal confidentiality and personnel records. So we do have to be very conscientious of that. If we're directly asked the question, does so-and-so work for the district, we can answer that question. And we can just answer they do or they do not work for the district. And that's really the limit of what we can do. And as is the case with any time we change personnel or make a decision about personnel, we don't advertise that, we don't make statements about that, but we do respond to requests for information, and we can answer in a very nondescript way.
I mean, it's interesting because when there's a big giant homicide case because of a police shooting, the police officer is identified, and whether they were fired or not is released. They say, this police officer was fired because of the police shooting. So in some instances, you can release that type of information. I don't know why it's not releasable here. But the other thing is, there's been a lot of demands from the community about the school committee needs to meet, they need to take an action. And then the answer from the school committee has been, we need to wait for the Title IX report. We need to wait for the Title IX report. We need to wait for the Title IX report. Now we have the Title IX report, and we still aren't doing anything. So what can we do to respond to those types of demands?
I think there's two pieces to that, and it's sort of building public understanding. So personnel, generally speaking, are essentially under the superintendent's purview as far as control. And those personnel matters are all entirely handled by the superintendent or his delegates. And where the school committee has purview is you hire a superintendent, and you approve of the finance director, the special education director, and the assistant superintendent. So it's a little less clear about what personnel role school committees have in that. The nature of contracts can make a difference in how you approach that. And so, that is why you had a meeting on Thursday night and had an executive session, was to deal with things that were under your purview. And so I think that, you know, as unsatisfying in some ways as that is, to be not specific, it's we don't want to expose the district to undue liability risks, regardless of how we make it feel. And I think you have to think about this in other ways. And regardless of how you feel about particular circumstances, I think you want to think more broadly about anyone's employment and the disposition of that employment and how it might impact their future employment. And that's why the laws have what constraints they have around them. And so if you can think in terms of your own personal career, and if you know, and a circumstance where if you've ever been terminated, you may not want that to be publicly known when you go to apply for your next job. And it may be the termination may be, in your opinion, not a reason that was valid. In the employer's opinion, a perfectly valid reason. And so you can't, you know, that prejudice of opinion is an important factor in regard to personnel records and why there are protections in the law for personnel records. So, you know, I fully get the sort of complications here in regard to that. So I just want to be conscientious of that. And I'm not benign or unaware of what the community wants, and I understand it. And
There are, yeah, you know, there are things that we will be able to do and Doug, through Doug, because there's incredible community interest in it, but most importantly, the most important thing is we have to bring this to closure. The community has to have some sense of closure. So whatever we can do to speed that process up, we will do. There are all kinds of implications that, you know, Doug is alluding to in terms of the report. And those things that he's going to be bringing forward will be important things for us, for the community to know. Even though you can't name names or positions, etc., there is enough in the report to come to certain kinds of conclusions, and those will be brought forward in one form or the other.
Katie?
I want to go back, Doug, to the first comment you made about communicating with staff, and I'll own that. I'm not sure if anyone else did that here, but I had reached out to you and Sarah Bass on Thursday, October 12th, and had not heard back from you as of this morning about my concern. And I view this as a very timely issue, and this is dealing with the numerous emails I think we've all been receiving about the conflict in Israel. And parents expressed concern about the need to know how is the district responding to keep students safe, in particular actions that are taken to prevent any anti-Semitic behaviors. And so that to me is a very timely issue. So not hearing back, other than from Sarah Bass that she would put it on like a November agenda, I was concerned and thought I really want to be able to respond to the public in terms of what is the high school and, you know, because we're at a regional meeting, the middle school doing in terms of responding to that. So I'm wondering if you can provide an update at this point, because I know this is, you know, in the sense, I think on a lot of topics, yeah, we have to build public understanding, as you say, but in this case, it's the public who's educating us because they're living the experience of dealing with their students who have major anxiety around this. And so is there anything that you can provide us in terms of what the middle school and high school is doing?
Sure. I think what I'll say is the following, is that, you know, in as much as we communicated out early in the year around the process and procedure for kids that are LGBTQIA+, to communicate if they're, you know, either being harassed, being bullied, being otherwise, you know, intimidated or whatever, you know, we have mechanisms for that. That same structure of support exists for this as well. So I think that, you know, it's a reminder that we have those things, and that those processes that we follow are in place and exist, you know, not exclusively for LGBTQIA circumstances, but for really all. So if we had a strong, and not to equate them, I want to make sure people are clear that it's not about equivalent, you know, making them equivalent. They're not. They're different circumstances, and how they manifest themselves are very different, and how people react and interpret them are very different. Nonetheless, the process by which we go through to work with and deal with those is very, very, very similar. So first and foremost is if there are specific things that come up and specific things that individual children are feeling, the single sort of answer is talk to a trusted adult in the school if it is affecting your ability to have school. That could be a counselor, it could be a teacher, it could be the principal. It depends on who you have a relationship. We're all mandatory reporters. We're all required to then take that information and take action relative to investigate and take action relative to that. Some people, their responsibility is to sort of cascade that up the sort of food chain of command, but others can, you know, if it's reported to, depending on who it's reported to, can take direct action and consider that and take that action. Additionally, we have, and we've altered this year actually, in our bullying form that's on the, you know, if you go to the ARPS.org website, which of course was down for a week, that's a whole nother thing, but was, you know, a technical difficulty outside our control, but it's back. And so on that main page, right at the top, you click that link, you can create an incident. About the fourth question on there is this about, you know, essentially a protected class. So whether it's really bullying, which, you know, state has a very specific definition around that, which is about repeated and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, that form now has a broader interpretation. So it can be a single incident, a single threat, so whatever. And so parents can use that form, students can use that form, teachers can use that form to report about something they saw. And so we want people to leverage that tool for this purpose as well as for any other sort of bias or harassment or other questions that come into play. And we look at those, and several people are notified when those forms are submitted. So those structures and mechanisms that are in place, and we've talked about earlier in the year, relative, more focused on the LGBTQIA questions, are actually the same broad set of steps and that we take. The other thing I'll say is on the 10th, so Tuesday, after the holiday, we sent out to the community, you know, a message that focused on again, on student safety, and had resources at the bottom, and they were particular to not getting specific into the particulars of politics or questions about it, but generally how to deal with when kids see things that are, you know, about war, conflict, or that sort of thing. So we put some resources in an email on Tuesday, and so I think we put some things in the community there that are also points that people can use and tools that they can use to help out. And certainly, you know, if you have, you know, I would say to you personally as a parent, but also to more broadly, is like, when in doubt, call people at school, ask the question, whether you know the counselor specifically or not. You know, you can call and just say, I'd like to talk to my student's counselor, and they'll figure out who it is. And I want, you know, folks to realize that students can advocate for themselves at the secondary level. They're much more capable of that. They may not feel comfortable with that, but if they've got a trusted adult, they can share with them. We can work through a process of what's the right response and how to support that child in that way. And then if the child isn't capable, willing, or whatever, parents can do the same thing. They can, again, sort of access the sort of trusted adults that they know within the school, and we can sort of start that process. I think the other thing I'll share is that just generally, just speaking about threats, I mean, you know, all the doors to the building are locked at all times. To access the building, you have to go through very specific places where we allow for people to essentially ring the bell and be let in by virtue of control. So all of those kinds of safety measures that we put in place that deal with you know, often we're thinking in terms of like active shooter circumstances, but could be other kinds of things that can come up, are all still in place as well, and all still part and parcel of our overall approach to safety and security of kids. I mean, that's why, you know, every adult in the building should be wearing one of these. And the people that don't wear these are in a uniform. So like our custodial staff, you'll notice they're all in maroon shirts with ARPS staff on the breast of the shirt. So we try to have fidelity to all of these things. When we have circumstances that arise in the community, we also try to be, and that's part of what we messaged out on Tuesday, and again on Friday in the newsletter, we were trying to make sure that our staff get those things as well. so that their vigilance around these kind of topics are also heightened, so they're keeping an eye out and being reminded of the importance to be extra conscientious for circumstances. So those are the few things I think I would say in that regard. So a lot of it's stuff we already do, and I think it's about reminding people that it's there, and that things that we have maybe had our focus on different kinds of sort of bias, harassment, et cetera, we can leverage for other purposes, and we should. So we've built those tools to be functional for us.
Thank you for that update. If I can just add, thinking proactively too, instead of waiting until someone needs a counselor, or I'm sure everyone can make use of that, but also thinking more in a sense of school culture and how do we foster and generate a safe feeling, in particularly in response to this. But thank you.
Right. I will say, you know, and I think, William, you actually asked for this, and I haven't gathered that yet. You know, there were some active lessons and I don't want to say announcements, but some work by our staff at the beginning of the year to talk about an inclusive environment. And so while, and at the school level, particularly the secondary level, I know from talking to them a little bit, they broadened it to not be just LGBTQIA. They were talking about a general sort of environment and about being respectful of peers and differences of opinion and that sort of thing. This is obviously a different circumstance, so I don't want to equate that. So it's an opportunity to kind of come back to that and re-message that again. And I'll, you know, I'm meeting with principals on Thursday, so I'll be sure to sort of touch base with them on that topic again.
Great. Jennifer?
Thank you for all that info, Doug. So regarding the Title IX reports, I understand what you're saying about not being able to share specific information about individuals. At one of our previous meetings, I had asked you, will you be able to tell us if any terminations have been made as a result of the Title IX reports? And I think you answered in the affirmative. Not who, but just if, whether. I didn't even ask the number, just like, have any terminate, maybe I should do this. As of today, have any terminations been completed as a result of the Title IX reports?
No.
Okay.
Partly because we're still in process.
Thank you. Okay, so then can you, you explained your approach regarding the draft that you're working on to pull out the findings and decouple from individuals, but I'm not sure I quite understand what that's going to result in. Are you like deeply redacting reports and you're going to publish what's left, or are you like writing something to summarize the Title IX and non-Title IX investigation reports? Like, what can you explain more about your approach in this draft that you hope to share with us in 2 weeks?
It's a great question. And I think it's a work in progress, I guess, is the short story. I think what I would like to say is that what I think is most constructive for us is to articulate those things that were perhaps investigated, found, or whether substantiated or not substantiated, you know, sort of investigated and found, and we need to have clear response to. So I think we want to be focused on sort of what is our response and structure of that. I think that what people can discern from what we put in as far as what, as I sort of generically say, things that happened or didn't happen that should have or should not have happened, I think it'll be clear. You know, it will be, you know, we'll try to do it in a way that you can't essentially take like the graphic report and line them up and go, oh, this is this and this is this. You know, X did something to Y is not the sort of format it's going to be. It's going to be more broad in that regard. But if there were failures of, you know, follow-up or failures of reporting or failures of you know, whatever. I mean, that sort of, you know, the list will be much more of that, like, these things happened, these things were, you know, actionable by us as far as things that could have been prevented had we done our process better, had we been, you know, active in our process, et cetera, et cetera. So I think it'll be fairly generic, but at the same time, I think it still will strike to the you know, specifics to some extent as far as you know, like I say, sort of things that did or did not happen, you know, and you know, it won't say something like, we violated Title IX. And then we go into like this laundry list of other things where it'll have to be a little more particular than that. Whether it gets into, you know, particular acts or not, I'm not sure yet. You know, because I think, you know, some of what we need to do is broader than that. You know, it's like, oh, this was the particular act that somebody did, that's a very specific violation under Title IX, let's say. But more broadly, what are we really getting at here that is less specific about the particular thing that happened, and more broadly what and how we approach some of these things to prevent that particular thing or any other related that could be similar but not exactly the same as. You know, I don't mean to be too vague here, but I'm being pretty vague, so I'm sorry. But I think my point is that if you know, a particular action happened, yes, that's bad, and it may be one of a class of things. And I'm much more interested in making sure the whole class doesn't happen, regardless of whether this, you know, a specific one did or didn't, right? So that's part of my focus, like how do we as organizationally make sure as best we can and put processes in place that can get to the sort of specifics of you know, like classes of failure as opposed to specific individual failure, you know.
And those are the kinds of things your whatever you're working on, your draft report will include?
Right.
Okay. Thank you. I have one last question, sorry. What can you tell us about the status of the APEA finalized contract?
I know our council has it. He has been busy with a few other things that we've talked about. And, you know, he does have other clients than just us, so I think that they've, you know, he has had it for a while. And at the same time, you know, it is part of what he's looking at. He's aware of it. We're going to try to get it turned over as soon as we can.
Thank you.
William?
So a couple questions. I was pulling up the bully form that you mentioned earlier.
Yep.
I think it looks great. The only question I would have is, says alleged aggressor, including age and school, and the aggressor could be a staff member, so I would maybe reflect on age and school, and just maybe make sure it's inclusive that it could be a staff member and not just another student, because it's with the way the form is set up, it's understood that it's with a student.
Yeah, the default focus has been traditionally around sort of student-on-student sort of circumstance, obviously in widening that perspective, so I take that piece of information as far as thinking about it. At the same time, they can still, you know, what building did it happen with, and they can guess, you know, it's like, oh, he's 48, you know, or whatever. I mean, we'll kind of guess they're not a student at that point, but
I just
but
want
they
to
may
make sure
name
the
names in
students
the
feel
narrative.
like they could, that this form could be used
Yeah.
against a staff member if the student feels like that's what they need to do.
Yeah, and I think that's a bit of messaging we could do some more around to let people know that is, and quite frankly, in my opinion, that, you know, if two staff have a conflict that are related to a Title IX,
Right.
or they could also use that. So I don't necessarily see this as explicitly just for students and things that have happened to students. I think it actually could be.
The way the form is set up, it's
Right.
specifically for students,
Yes.
as it says targeted student at the very beginning. My other question would be on, I know there was a press release about the background checks. Do we have a status of where they are, the number of employees that haven't had background checks? And where we are as far as, like, are we about halfway there? We're about a quarter way there? We haven't started yet? I know it was gonna be the hope that was done in December, I believe. Do you have any updates you could give us on the background checks?
I think that I think it was January, but I think it's still on track is the short answer I'll give. And now I'm trying to remember whether I was told a specific, I may have been given a number that was like ballpark and not sufficient to sort of say publicly, but you know, they're in process, they're working through that and making good progress on that. So I think, you know, the target of January is the sort of completion dates. Still likely. Be lovely to finish sooner. Obviously, if we do, we'll let you know.
And if something did come up in those background checks, would the public be notified through another press release or directly notified? Or how would the families and students and staff be aware of something if there was a violation?
So again, it sort of falls under a private personnel record kind of situation. Matter of fact, you know, when you do those kind of criminal records check, there's a very limited number of people that can actually review them. I'm not one of them. That speaks to sort of how isolated and centralized and noted that is. I think if it comes up, I think we'll work through that, because it'll depend on, you know, a number of different factors relative to any given employee. And I will say this more broadly, and this is going back to when we began the Corey check by virtue of state requiring us to do this. We have had and do have staff that have criminal records. And, we use if that's the case, we look at a number of different factors relative to whether or not they're suitable for employment with us. Some of it's like, did it happen a long time ago? Was it a violent crime? Did it involve weapons? Did it involve, drugs? Different things are considered in a number of different ways, and time's a critical piece too. So if somebody, stole a car at 17 and it was 27 years ago, it'll come up. Is it still relevant today?
Right.
We kind of weigh those things, and so there's some judgment around that, and we try to be conscientious of that and people that have, complex histories. If it was last Thursday, that's a little more complicated, obviously. And if it's last Thursday and it's a sexual crime against children, yeah, it's really going to be a bit of a problem for us,
Yes.
right? And so those are, decidedly more problematic. But so it won't be a public process in that regard. But obviously, if there's action needing to be taken, we'll take it, and it'll be immediate.
Okay, and my last question is, on the pronoun forms, do we have a number of students that are accessing that pronoun forms?
Oh.
And then if we don't know that, have we made a step towards making it a bigger document instead of just a pronoun form? I know you alluded to that the last time I asked that a different organization maybe had sparked your interest in making it a bigger form than just to pick your pronoun.
Yeah. So I will have to say that is probably on a sheet I made a note of last
That's
time and
fine.
haven't had a chance to get back to. And no, I don't have a count, but
Okay.
that I should be able to get sooner than later. I'm gonna make a note to try to send that out to the committee. So if we have
Thank you.
some submissions, we can let you know sort of what the count is on that. And so, to be determined.
Thank you.
I think Roger had his hand up next.
Yes, I liken your report and your redacted, however you're going to summarize, as to a window that's transparent, which is what everyone is writing to me. Be transparent. It's translucent. No one needs to tell me, looking through a window that's translucent, that it's snowing. I know it. I can see it. And then I'm only wondering what kind of shovel or how much snow is falling, how much I'm going to have to shovel. And in terms of the report, whatever it is that you can reveal, those things have happened. And it's what we're going to do, as you said, going forward. Because in terms of, everyone has a version of the story. And even even as you look at it, there are certainly things that we don't know. We still don't know. Someone saw something. Nobody asked me. I'm not going to say anything. Whatever. And so we know the embodiment of what happened, and folks know. And it's not going to, the transparency would be wonderful, but it's not appropriate. But translucence is. So, Superintendent, be as translucent as you can, and we hope that the community will look at what we do from this date forward as to how seriously we look at this and how seriously we want to make sure this does not happen again. So, thanks.
Anna?
I was wondering how far you were on finding a new HR director?
That's a great question. So, I was having conversations with Kathy Mazer, who's providing support in our department, about some staff that are returning and how to structure the department in the short term. It's a complicated thing at the moment for a lot of different reasons. So I don't have any specific updates, but I when we do, we'll let you know in that regard, and, you know, how we,
I would like to stop using a consultant as soon as possible and get a permanent person in that position as soon as possible.
It's expensive.
appreciate the feedback.
Okay. Are there, like, we have to move on, it's like almost 10
Really
o'clock.
quickly,
have-
I would
but-
just second what Anna said
Okay.
and throw my support in that.
To vote on it.
Point of order,
Yes,
the 30 minutes have elapsed.
yes.
Yeah, that's,
So we need to vote again if we would like to extend our meeting for another 30 minutes.
Point of clarification,
Yes.
is there any way to switch order on the agenda, or we have to do what's prescribed there? And I say that only because some of these topics are very heavy and others are a little bit more logistical.
Yes, if the
So-
committee agrees to rearrange things, we can rearrange things.
Is there discussion about the vote?
No, I move to extend the
Oh,
meeting by
sorry.
30 minutes.
I second.
Okay. Tillman?
I will vote no on this particular motion because I do not think it's reasonable to expect that people spend 3.5 hours in the evening and then are capable to work their regular day jobs the following day. I think as a committee we need to be more efficient or meet more frequently with a reasonable agenda. We still have 10 agenda items ahead of us. I don't see how we can get reasonably through them by just continuing to extend. So specifically, I recommend that we meet next Tuesday and cancel the October 31st meeting, which is on Halloween and thereby not very convenient for most parents, and finish the agenda then.
Katie?
I might suggest that we talk about the subcommittees at least, so that we can continue work outside of these meetings, in hopes that that won't go on too long.
Irv?
I'm with Tillman. This has been a very, very long meeting, and I don't wish to continue it tonight. Those of us who have incredibly intensive jobs and have the kinds of days that are really long. This is very long, very long. And I agree with Tillman that we need to somehow figure out how to make them more efficient.
Katie, you're speaking to the motion again?
I do want to just say that we have been elected to this position to serve the public and want to take that into consideration as we make our decision.
Right, yep, Gabrielle?
in order to serve the public, I think that I need to be at my best and after a certain number of hours awake and working. I don't think I can bring the best decision-making and concentration to the topic. So I'm also with Tillman on this.
So maybe we can have a friendly amendment to extend it for 15 minutes so we can address the subcommittees, and then I will work with the superintendent about when to set another meeting to finish the rest of these items.
I didn't move that.
I accept the friendly amendment.
Okay. All right, so
I have amended my motion to extend the meeting by 15 minutes
Cover one topic.
all
to
in
cover
favor?
one topic.
Yes. All in favor?
Aye.
Unanimous. Okay. Thank you. All right, so we will very quickly move on to subcommittee assignments. Give me 1 second and I will pull it up. Okay. Jennifer?
So I had emailed the chair a suggestion of a new subcommittee, and she had implied this might be a good time to bring it up. So I'm just going to bring it up, even though I know we want to end soon, but it's important. My proposal for a new ad hoc subcommittee is that we create a subcommittee of the Regional School Committee whose purpose is to review the report that we all saw last week with the purpose of suggesting actions the school committee could take coming out of that report. And given that it's a confidential document, that those meetings could take place in the central office with unredacted copies that are left, the subcommittee meetings could take place in the central office with unredacted copies that we would leave there, but that we would go through the report with the subcommittee, and the subcommittee could make recommendations to the school committee as to actions the school committee could take. And I don't mean propose policies specifically, but I do mean suggest maybe this policy should be amended, or maybe we should consider creating a new policy that would then go through the policy subcommittee. But that's my suggestion, is to create a new subcommittee with that goal.
So I will respond to that a little bit. So I did look, and because of the way our school committees are set up, right, we are, under our purview is policy rather than administrative things. So my suggestion is that we give the policy subcommittee the directive to work with the future list that the superintendent is going to create about and how our policies can be adjusted, new ones created, to make sure those things don't happen in the future. Are you raising your hand?
Yes.
Okay.
Because when you look at the policy manual in terms of the school committee's authorities and duties and powers and duties, and one of the things when you look at it, focus in upon the policy, legislative, focus upon the policy and legislative responsibilities of the school committee. We are a policy-making body. That's one. Two, the superintendent, as defined in our policy, follows the policies of the school committee. Now, what I want in terms of this, if that, it seems to me that either it has to be fish or fowl. Are you suggesting that we create a new committee? If so, that has implications. Or are you suggesting we just form a group to meet with the superintendent, but not a formal committee that would have to, that would have to possibly go through a policy-making body?
Just knowing that we have about 11 minutes or so left, I like this idea, but I think it is going to take up some time to decide what we're going to do. And I think, again, my idea of discussing this topic now is so that the pre-existing committees that exist can function and meet. So if possible, if we can table that suggestion for another meeting, future meeting, and return to filling in this chart, that would be my suggestion.
Okay. Right. So our first committee listed is the Budget and Audit Subcommittee. Usually has 3 to 4, I mean, you guys can all see this, 3 to 4 meetings per year, about an hour each, and 3 members sit on the board. Are any takers? I will sit on the Budget Subcommittee. Gabriella?
Yeah, I'm happy to do that. Is this available to us somewhere?
Yes, it is on board docs in the
It is.
regular I mean, what is in there right now is from 21, 22. I will, once we do this, I will update this, so
So
it will be
where's it
current.
at in board docs?
By the way, I did send this out, both
On
of,
the-
everyone has this, at least I sent it out.
On the far right-hand side, there's something, it's like
Library?
Right.
yeah, and then
Oh,
under that tab,
subcommittees.
there's a list of subcommittees.
Full list of all standing.
Yes. Tillman,
I volunteer.
you volunteer as tribute? All right.
I can't look
Uh,
backwards.
Next on the list is the policy subcommittee. Any takers? Jennifer, look at that.
Did you get me on the first one?
Yep.
Okay.
So Jennifer, you're staying, and then Anna and William.
I am happy to if needed.
Excellent, thank you. All right, and then our next is Superintendent Evaluation Subcommittee, also 3 members.
Oh, right,
Or previously I had 4. William?
Yeah, I'll put my name on that.
Thank you.
No one else wants it, I guess.
I'll do it if nobody else will, I guess.
Thanks, Anna.
How many people, do we need 4 people, or?
It says 3 usually.
Okay.
Previously, there were 4.
Who are the people who volunteer for the budget commit, for what?
Budget committee is myself, Gabriella, and Tillman.
All right, good enough.
And then, so, we need 1 more taker
For,
for the superintendent evaluation subcommittee. You were on it before.
I was doing it before, I'll just stay.
Okay.
Because it, yeah,
Okay,
guys go away.
all right, so, last time we went over the school equity advisory committee.
Send
Yep.
Mike.
Oh, sorry. Thank you. So last time we went over this, the School Equity Advisory Committee, William volunteered, and Irv, you said you would remain.
On the school equity,
Yeah.
I
Did not
said
want
that?
it. No, he didn't say
Oh,
that.
you didn't?
I know he didn't. He,
All right.
he was very happy that I said I would be on it, and he passed his hat off to
All
me.
right.
That's right, I was.
All right. Sorry, I apologize, I didn't cross it off. Are you
More
raising your hand to
responsible member than I
volunteer?
was.
Thank you. All right. Contract negotiation for team for the APEA 3 units.
We don't really need that one.
I am currently listed on there. I'm happy to stay on there, so there is someone on there. We probably won't have to renegotiate until next year, right? Any takers if you want to put your name here with mine? No? Okay. The contracting for AFSMI,
I think that's been me.
are you okay to
Yeah.
stay there? And then APAA, Anna, you volunteered last time.
I did.
You did. Also, again, it shouldn't be something that needs negotiating in the next year. That was one of the ones we went through just so we had someone on the committee should something come up.
I'm happy to do it, I don't remember volunteering.
Okay,
Okay.
thank you.
I got it.
Regional warrant authorization, which means someone will receive, can you explain that a little bit better than
Yeah,
I can?
So, this would be the person that signs the warrants and then reports those warrants to the full committee. You know, when you do that, you actually have an ability to look at the full warrant, so if you want to sort of page through and look at the details of who got what money sent to them, that's perfectly within your right, and you should, in some respects, but then you sign the warrant and then report those at the next school committee meeting. What you should really do there is have the person that primarily does it and then a backup in case somebody's out of town or unavailable.
Boy, look at all those hands.
If you sign a warrant and you look through it, but you're not really qualified to understand all the details of it, and then sometime down the line, it turns out somebody has misappropriated funds, does the person signing the warrant have any kind of legal liability in that situation?
Not really. I mean, the school committee as a whole, so the thing is that the way it used to work, and the way it could still work if you choose to, is to have a majority of the school committee members sign the warrants. It's a pretty big hassle with this large group, because I gotta get 5 people to sign. So, you know, if there's, you know, misappropriation or something of that sort, that's generally gonna fall on the finance director or school staff, because they'll have been the ones. You won't generally, by virtue of reviewing this, have an opportunity. Obviously, you want to review it first and then sign. If there's something that it begs a question, you're certainly welcome to ask that question and get more detail. What we generally make available to you is sort of, here's who's getting paid for how much. If you want to see the actual like invoice or the details about what really happened, you're welcome to come to our office and we'll pull out the file and you can look at that. So if you have any qualms or questions, they're certainly okay to ask, and that's the case. But there is a you know, sort of the bigger risk is for someone in the business or finance director role to have, you know, allowed something to happen inappropriately. You guys are not really going to get in trouble for that.
And this happens online, is that right?
Yeah, we do.
Yes.
We are able to do it online, and the signatures are online, so it's you don't have to come in
It's,
unless you want to.
Currently, the person who is responsible for doing that is me. So, you know, I'm really anxious to see someone take this over.
Jennifer?
So this is what I'll say about signing warrants, because I do it for a different committee. It's an important job. It doesn't require any meetings. It does require you to be able to check your email regularly and respond promptly. And then it also requires you to be organized enough to then take the warrant. It's like you'll receive a PDF after you sign it, and then make sure it gets posted to Board Docs. So it's like an important administrative role that doesn't require any meetings, and is something you can do like on your own time.
Well, Jennifer, you just said something I didn't know, that it was also the responsibility of the person who's doing the warrants to have it posted on Board Docs. That's why they never.
I would say I would love to have that not be something you have to do. It's always good backup to do
That's right,
that.
because that's why they never appeared on Board Docs, because I never posted them on Board.
Okay. Let's move
Can
forward.
we do that?
Gabriella,
Sure.
is there someone
like
who
to
is
know
willing to be,
meetings.
you'll be a backup?
That's fine, yeah.
Okay.
You want to be the primary?
I don't care.
I'll be the
whatever.
backup.
Oh,
That's fine.
okay, so William is, okay.
They're gonna have to,
Can fight it over.
yeah, someone's gonna have their email with
We'll
someone's.
figure it out. It's okay.
Yeah, all right,
All right.
you guys.
I know the people that need to know this information, so
Yeah.
I'll make sure they get it
All right, so
post
just-
haste.
And then
Just tell me
next-
when I'm off the hook.
Jennifer, our next up is the Clerical Merit Award selection. You
Yeah.
were on that
Yep.
before. Would you like to
Yes.
stay?
Sure.
Okay. And then our MASC designee was also you, Jennifer, previously.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think we're sending anyone to the meeting this year, it seems like, so, but
Okay.
I'll stay the delegate.
That is a chair. The collaborative representative, Tillman, thank you. CPAC liaison, that was you, William.
Yeah, I think it was
before.
me.
Are you,
Yeah, it's
can
fine.
stay there? Okay. And then, BIPAC, EL.
Actually,
They actually call them
It's
themselves
actually
MPAC.
impact now. Multilingual.
Oh my goodness. Okay. What are its initials now?
MPAC for Multilingual Parent Advisory Council.
EMPAC.
MPAC.
The state calls it, I think, either BIPAC or LPAC. I'm not sure which,
Okay.
but we renamed it because that's what we do.
All right, I will figure out the perfect lettering for this. And it is to meet with the Bilingual Parent Advisory Council and liaison between the school committee and the that committee.
Can I clarify, there's 2 different ones, one at the regional and one at the elementary, or I'm
This is-
serving as the one on Amherst, so.
So this is only for the region.
Region.
Well, so there's one MPAC, and then
Okay.
there can be 2, because there's 2 different school committees, there can be 2 school committee members on it, or it could be the same person who wears 2 hats. You'd wear the Amherst hat and the regional hat when you participate, which I'm in favor of doing.
I'm happy to do that. if-
All right.
if needed.
Excellent. That is all. We have made it through our subcommittee.
Are we allowed to change that October 31 meeting?
I will work with the superintendent to see if we can. All right. Entertain a motion.
I move to adjourn the meeting.
Second.
I'll second that.
We can just all in favor of adjourning?
Aye.
All opposed to adjourning? And we are adjourned with 8 in favor, 1 opposed.
I'd rather finish the meeting. I don't want to come back
Thank you
another
guys
day.
all very much. I know this is
Whatever.
a long lot of day and night.
Talking to the North Hampton people, their meeting goes, their regular meeting goes until midnight.